It all began with a stage, a mic, and a girl stepping into a spotlight that she truly is not used to. A girl who would take a risk that at first would seem to pay off greatly, as the audience loves her performance. And yet, by the end of it, when she steps off of that stage, she's somehow burned every single bridge that she's ever built in an act that was one of the most brutally honest things that she's ever done. When it comes to Helga Pataki, it's no secret that her home life isn't the best, to put it mildly, and her social life is pretty much equally as tragic. I guess the same could be said for pretty much her entire life, including her upbringing, and that's a topic that I've covered extensively in my Dark Side of Hey Arnold video about Helga. The thing is though, despite years of turmoil and neglect, Helga is still in control. Sure, emotionally repressed, but calculated nevertheless. There were many times in the series where we would see her lose her cool, but in general, Helga as a character is one that had a solid tendency to keep it together. She might not always have the right answer for the situation, but she'll try to take charge as if she does. When faced with a moment where she finds herself hated by everyone, however, she would ultimately come to find that no matter what she does, there isn't necessarily a correct answer. Today, on our nostalgic walk down memory lane, we're gonna dive into an episode of Hey Arnold where we would see it all fall apart for Helga. Every layer would unravel, not in a slow or subtle manner, but in an abrupt spiral of a stand-up routine that would leave her questioning who she is as a person. This one is a story about power, and the terrifying freedom of actually being seen for once, and how quickly that freedom can turn toxic when you've spent your entire life being ignored. At the end of the trail, though, it's an episode that, contradictory to almost every other episode of Hey Arnold, comes with a very murky moral to the story. And that right there, oddly enough, would be the brilliance of it. But before we get into it, I just want to thank you so much for being here and for clicking on this video. I take your time very seriously, and I appreciate you spending it here with me. I hope that you're having an excellent day and that this video finds you well. If you end up enjoying it, be sure to drop a like and let me know what you think down in the comments. This episode we're checking out today is one that I'm so hyped to dive into, and watching it back for the first time in a very long time, I'm honestly surprised at how dark and complex the story told here is. I do want to announce really quick though, I am planning my next Dark Side of Hey Arnold video right now. It's a massive one covering more than I have ever attempted before, and I can't wait for you all to see it. Lastly, I also want to remind you, just in case you missed the announcement, I did launch a second channel called Dusk Till Shawn 2, which is intended to be a backup channel, just in case this one ever has any issues. Furthermore, it's where I'm going to be uploading all Cartoon Network related content from now on, so I don't have to really risk my main channel as far as copyright is concerned. If you wouldn't mind going on over there and quickly subscribing, I would greatly appreciate it. And with that out of the way, let's get right back into it. So, in originally approaching this video, I thought it would be excellent to look into Helga's show for the juicy roasting session first and foremost. That would be the most memorable part of the episode for me personally. However, looking back at this one, I was really shocked to realize how much it highlights about Helga's psychology and her severely fractured sense of self. This seemingly goofy tale of a girl stirring the pot at school, in a sense, truly is a metaphorical case study in identity performance, weaponized humor, and insecurity when you look at it at the right angle and through the appropriate lens. As this episode starts out, we see most of Arnold's class gathered at the new after-school hangout, the Cocoa Hut, which is a coffee shop / lounge that they opened in PS 118. Gerald stands there upon the stage doing some spoken word poetry, delivering an eloquent soliloquy about life as a kid at school. As he finishes, Mr. Simmons gets in front of everybody, moved to tears over the creativity that these kids have poured into the stage that he's provided for them. He then proceeds to welcome their next act, Helga, who's prepared some special impressions for them all to enjoy. As she takes to the stage, she begins her act by mocking Principal Warts and his often redundant announcements that he makes all day over the school PA system, leaving all of the kids in stitches at her impression.
And then there's Stinky Peterson. Is it me, or is this guy always a step behind? I don't get it. What's Principal Warts going on about? I'm all confused. All I know is I'm having lemon pudding. On account of lemon pudding's my favorite pudding.
What's so funny? Is that supposed to be me or something?
As everyone is losing it at Helga roasting Stinky, she then starts going in on Rhonda, talking about how she's basically the self-appointed fashion police. Of course, Rhonda gets extremely offended like Stinky did, as Helga then proceeds to mock Eugene tripping his way into the classroom every morning, and Mr. Simmons overusing the word special and abusing air quotes like they owe him money.
Let's see if you can guess who this is. Ah, Mommy! Ah, yeah! That's Harold!
Later on, the kids are gathered on the steps of the school talking about how messed up it was that Helga laid into them so heavily. Of course, they're all able to laugh at each other getting roasted. However, when it comes to being the one roasted, they're all just offended and can't take the joke. When Arnold basically points that out to them though, everybody begins to take note of the fact that he's somehow pretty much the only one that didn't get burnt to a crisp by Helga.
Yeah!
Helga thinks she's so funny. Well, if that's her idea of fun, then she has something else coming to her.
Yeah! She has something else coming to her!
Yeah, she has something else coming to her. Hey, fellas, what does she have coming to her?
Elsewhere in the halls, Helga is bragging to Phoebe about how awesome her routine was and how she had everyone in stitches. She assumes that she's going to be pretty popular around school from this point on. However, Phoebe seems not all too confident in that, based on the way that Helga portrayed her peers' mannerisms. And at that, she's not all too surprised when her doubts are proven true as Stinky walks by and Helga tries to say hi to him, but he tells her he isn't talking to her anymore. In class, things just kinda get worse as Helga takes a seat by Rhonda, trying to say hi to her next.
I'm sorry, Helga. I don't have time to talk to you. I'm too busy worrying about what everyone is wearing. I don't have any other thoughts or ideas in my head.
Yeah, so what's your point? Hey, it's a joke, Rhonda.
As the classroom fills up, Helga realizes that everyone is avoiding her, leaving her sitting by herself, isolated. The day progresses as Helga sits down at lunch with Phoebe, saying that she doesn't understand why everyone is being so defensive about her comedy act. Phoebe tries to explain to Helga that her humor may have had a little too much truth to it, and that may have been what hurt people's feelings.
I was just telling it like it is. It's comedy, Phoebe. Where's their sense of humor? They laughed at each other. Can't they laugh at themselves?
Perhaps not. Try to think how it would feel if it were you being made fun of, Helga.
No one would dare try that.
Out of my way, geek babe.
Rhonda's doing Helga!
You clowns trying to make fun of me, and you'll have to answer all bets.
Even Phoebe ends up laughing at Rhonda's impression, which really has Helga getting a taste of her own medicine. realizing just how much it hurts to have an entire room full of people laughing at your expense. In a moment of sad realization, she begins to lament the fact that she made everybody hate her. Phoebe, though, like the good best friend that she is, tries to help Helga, suggesting that maybe she could give a public apology or ask for forgiveness in the form of a positive long-form poem that highlights her peers' positive attributes.
Those guys don't want me to be proactive. They want laughs. They want your jeans slipping on a banana peel and falling down an open manhole.
I'm serious, Helga. You need to make a sincere apology, and I can help you. I have some ideas. What do you say?
Well, no one's even speaking to me at this point. What have I got to lose?
From there, Helga and Phoebe spend hours on end together after school, while Helga contributes absolutely nothing at all, and Phoebe ghostwrites the entire uplifting apology poem for her. Naturally, Helga is apprehensive when she gets a look at Phoebe's work. However, Phoebe, on the other hand, is confident that she's gonna be a massive hit at the Cocoa Hut. Just like that, we cut to the next day after school, where all of the kids are gathered for their after-school Cocoa Hut session, talking about how floored they are that Helga has the audacity to step foot on that stage again after what she did to them. They all agree that if she roasts them again, she's gonna get it big time. Ultimately, though, they're all shocked when Helga takes to the stage and announces that she won't be doing impressions this time, and instead, she's reading a poem that emphasizes their positive attributes.
What can I say about my friends who are pleasant and loyal to the end? There's Harold, Rhonda, Stinky, and Nate, and Sid and Nadine, and gosh, they're all great.
Who's Nate?
Take Rhonda. She's a stylish girl, one of the nicest in the world. And Arnold is a thoughtful fellow, as smart and kind as his hair is yellow.
All of the kids sit there very unenthused, wondering where the comedy is, realizing that her roasting them all was much better than this. They start booing her, and Helga walks off stage, telling Phoebe that it doesn't make any sense. They hated her when she was rude, and now they hate her when she's being nice. She's left feeling like she just can't win. Right at that moment, though, Arnold walks up saying that everyone hates her act because it isn't funny and she isn't acting like herself. It's clear to everybody that she's just saying made-up nice things to win everyone over, and of course it isn't working it for a second.
Do the old stuff, the funny stuff.
Who's out there? Is that Stinky? It is Stinky. I can tell by the dazed look on his face. Probably dreaming about lemon pudding again. Gosh almighty, I sure do love lemon pudding.
That sounds just like me.
She roasts Phoebe a bit, and then she moves on to Arnold, as she proceeds to non-stop lay into him for pretty much the entirety of her set. Unlike the rest of the kids, though, Arnold is able to laugh at her jokes and appreciate where it's coming from, letting Helga enjoy her moment.
Thank you, you're a beautiful audience.
So, as far as this episode is concerned, the well of easily overlooked subcontext and deeper meaning goes substantially deeper than I originally could have ever imagined. First and foremost, though, there's one thing that I have to admit I'm just really puzzled by, and that would be the moral of the story here. Like, Hey Arnold as a show is one that in nearly every single episode, there's an important moral to be learned from the story told. Sometimes it's harder to pick up than others, but a lot of times it's pretty straightforward. In all honesty, though, this episode might be the one with the most hard to dissect moral lesson. It's basically the moral equivalent of snorkeling in a muddy swamp. This story is one that at first encourages self-expression and rewards it in the form of Helga getting laughs. But then it punishes that same exact self-expression in the form of everyone giving Helga the cold shoulder if they weren't actively talking smack to her, only to reward the self-expression yet again in the end. But strictly dependent upon how it makes the audience feel. I mean, if this doesn't contradict every single clean-cut moral to the story that Hey Arnold has ever given us, I don't know what does. Like, we've seen instances of Helga realizing that she did someone wrong and apologizing to make amends and repair the situation as much as she can. We've seen instances of her doubting characters such as Harold only for him to come through and prove himself, leaving her taken back by his aptitude. In this one though, the answer was just continue to roast them when they realize how awful the alternative is? In all reality, once everyone had taken offense and public opinion was swayed against Helga, there wasn't really a single thing that she could do to earn their acceptance back. And that right there is the brilliance of the social commentary sprinkled within this episode. Sure, her initial stand-up bit had their side split and had them enjoying themselves, but once they decided that they didn't like it as much as they initially thought that they did, no amount of apologizing or sweet gestures would really have won their favor back because their minds were already made up. But oddly enough, continuing to roast them was what gained their acceptance back? Like, did they just get over themselves and decide all of a sudden that they understood the direction that Helga's humor was leaning in? I mean, sure, you could say that they were all okay with it because she roasted Phoebe and Arnold as well, but I'll blatantly say that that doesn't really make sense because before she did that, she started by roasting Stinky again, and everybody, even Stinky himself, laughed at it. On the whole, this episode delves into topics like conditional acceptance, social hypocrisy, and the painful cost of being authentic when that authenticity comes along with traits that go against the grain socially. In this one, we see Helga using her humor as a weapon, and for once, the people actually hear her. They cheer her on, and they enjoy her roasting their peers. In the long run though, after nearly everyone has been caught in her sights, their reaction falls more into how dare you. And Helga's justification for it is that she's just telling it like it is. Which, now, that in and of itself is kind of a hard pill to swallow. A lot of times, that's ultimately just kind of an excuse for being a jerk, not minding what you're saying, and dismissing everybody else's worldview while prioritizing your own words or mindset above all else. The thing is, though, there's a line with this kind of comedy. In all reality, if this kind of performance had been done by an adult for other adults, it may not have been seen as that funny, and it certainly wouldn't have been seen as offensive as it was. With that being said, even then, there are some adults who can't handle this kind of comedy without taking it personally. To think that kids would be able to handle this kind of roast comedy without being offended is honestly just kind of senseless. But with that being said, Helga herself is also a child, so it makes sense that she wouldn't have that kind of foresight. The thing is though, all she was doing was telling the truth. She was highlighting all of their flaws, their patterns, their vulnerabilities, all things that she herself and all of her other classmates have observed. The things she points out aren't really secrets by any means. She doesn't even really do it with malice either. It's all with brutal honesty and in the name of making people laugh. In all reality, these kids still reject her because they lack that sense of self-awareness for the most part. Above that though, this in a way highlights that sometimes audiences don't always want brutal honesty that isn't covered in a sugarcoat, especially when it comes to young children. It's a big lesson in knowing your audience without a doubt. Helga came out swinging fully authentic, and sure, it was hilarious, but the audience definitely wasn't ready to process what they were about to experience. As a result though, Helga ends up swinging fully in the opposite direction, leaning into forced niceness, which the crowd was pretty much disgusted by, smelling the inauthentic lie from a mile away. They were so quick to boo her and let her know that she wasn't funny anymore, and the biggest reason behind that was that they could tell that any sense of genuine Helga had completely gone out the window. As much of a crazy contradiction as it is to the point of them not wanting full honesty, this right here highlights how much an audience craves authenticity. It's the perfect juxtaposition to highlight just how confusing the moral of the story is, because we literally just saw Helga walking the tightrope between these people wanting the real her, but struggling with how cruel her authenticity can come across. Eventually though, what really makes this one truly so hard to process and come to a proper moral for is the fact that these people ended up giving her permission to go back to roasting them. Helga, ironically, ends up cheered on and loved again for doing the same exact thing that got her rejected by everybody in the first place. It's kind of a big symbolic moment where it seems as if the audience is saying that they'd rather be hurt by the real Helga than bored by the fake Helga. And that really is what makes this such a truly complex moral. It's really a hard one to pin down. Like, when we look at it at face value, it kind of reads something along the lines of be yourself, unless you're the kind of person that we don't like. But the acceptance and embracing of the roast in the end really twists this into something that's hard to pull apart. I mean, is this a tale of self-acceptance? Maybe. Helga did end up being her true self on that stage, and she was finally admired for it. But like, this entire time, it's been a cautionary tale of how your true self can have the tendency to destroy every single friendship that you've ever built, leaving you completely emotionally isolated. As much as I don't enjoy the phrase, I call it as I see it, it truly does apply to Helga. She doesn't have very much empathy, she doesn't care much about others or what they want, and she's not really one to consider how anybody else feels until things have blown up in her face. Zooming out to the big picture though, we could also see this as a metaphor for how society handles difficult personalities. We as people have a tendency to either reject them for being themselves or exploit them for entertainment, as long as they're funny about it. As it pertains specifically to Helga though, this is an even harder aspect to pick apart because as far as her difficult personality goes, it isn't necessarily something that she was born with. I mean, sure, Helga is really cruel, and that cruelty started as young as preschool, but the cold hard truth is that she's chronically neglected at home, emotionally repressed to oblivion, and intellectually gifted in a world that seems to not only have no idea what to do with her, but not really care about what happens to her in general. When it comes to her roasting, sure, she's doing what she knows. She's poking fun at observations that she's been making of her peers for years now, likely saying what they've all been thinking, but afraid to actually say out loud. However, underneath that clown nose that she's putting on for everyone, the roasting comes from pain. And that right there might be what makes it sting the most. She, as a character, is incredibly misunderstood and has been made fun of previously by essentially every single person that she roasted in her first stand-up act. She's not really punching down whatsoever. She's punching at people who ignore her and have a tendency to minimize her. When we look at it that way and consider that in the long run, Helga didn't even end up changing anything, this episode really isn't about a girl who learns a lesson, but instead a girl who learns that her voice really only matters if it's entertaining to everybody. When she takes the stage and roasts her classmates, she's not just being mean, she's being honest, albeit brutally. She's unfiltered and just painfully real. Above all though, she's witty and hilarious. She owns her power and just dominates on stage, crushing it. But the second her truth stops being fun for the audience, the moment that they realize that it's their turn to be the punchline, they all turn on her. They boo her. They essentially cancel her. She tries something a little nicer. She softens the tone and cleans up the message, completely watering herself down to what she assumes will be more digestible. But the crowd just hates it even more than before. If I'm being honest, this right here is such an incredible representation of modern internet culture. So many artists, performers, and even regular everyday people deal with this kind of thing. You're allowed to be yourself as long as you're marketable. If you're too real like Helga was, people find you negative. If you're too critical, they call you a hater. If you mask it in humor, they'll laugh, but the second you take that clown makeup off, they disown you. I mean, forbid you be honest and not funny, now you're just painted as annoying. Helga finally finds a platform and has something to say, but she learns pretty quickly that her voice is only allowed when it serves others. They only want to hear it when it comes with a punchline. Her pain, her resentment, her trauma, it only becomes valuable when it's rebranded as comedy. In a sense, this really does highlight the struggle of performance identity and the pressures of being liked. The struggle of feeling like you need to put on that same clown makeup every single day and be entertaining for everybody just for them to like you. For Helga though, this cuts even deeper because in a sense, roasting people gives her power without vulnerability. She's the one on stage with the mic in her hand. In a world where she feels completely unheard at home, being given a microphone and everybody watching is almost like a safe space in a sense. They have to hear her, and they don't really have a choice otherwise. Where she lacks control and attention at home, on this stage, she has both of those things. In a way, this humor for her is almost like a defense mechanism combined with an odd superiority complex, clashing with an intense inferiority complex. She stands on that stage with everyone watching and just tears them to pieces. This stage persona that she puts on, it's almost kind of like her everyday persona but cranked all the way up to 11. It really is crazy to realize that as much as this episode is a massive display of performance identity, the same can be said about Helga as a character in general. Like, her entire existence is kind of wrapped up in performance. She's almost kind of a walking contradiction in the sense that in public, she's this loud, aggressive, and sarcastic girl, but when she's all alone, she's deeply romantic, poetically spoken, and extremely emotionally vulnerable. What this episode did was take that entire identity, which in and of itself is like a performance, and give it a stage for everybody to witness it. Yet, only under certain conditions. She finally has power in the form of a voice that people want to hear on stage. But of course, the second she pivots away from the biting social commentary about her peers to being kind, she's rejected and shunned by the crowd. The reason behind this is tragic and plain as day. It's that they weren't really cheering for the real Helga. They weren't cheering for Helga the person, they were cheering for Helga the performance. The true danger in that is how much this performance was deeply rooted in external validation for Helga. She said it herself. When she thought her show went well, she was sure that she was going to be popular at school now. This just shows how performance identity trains us to equate our value with what others find entertaining. For Helga, she's caught in this messed up loop where she wants the attention and love from her peers, but she's walking this line where she's calling her own authenticity into question, wondering if that's truly what's best for her. Wondering if she should forsake her own true self to be something else that she thinks all of these other kids want her to be. As the dominoes fall, this kind of points to a profound case of identity diffusion. Helga is the kind of person who struggles to develop a stable sense of self. She's constantly shifting to either please others or adapt to conflicting expectations of her. I mean, she already lives this double life emotionally, flipping between brutish in public and emotional in private very rapidly. And moments like this truly push her as a person even further into that fragmented sense of self. We've seen her gushing over Nancy Spumoni's signature snow boots like she cares about fashion, and we've also seen her dismissing fashion like it's dumb. We've seen her calling makeup stupid, only to show up moments later completely caked in makeup. Between the clashing personalities and the chameleon-like tendencies, it really boils down to the fact that Helga's time on stage really was the purest form of performance identity, and as things would progress, by the end, she's left without much of a moral to lean into, and more than anything, likely questioning if these people actually like her, or if they just like the version of her that entertains them. Ultimately, her classmates are willing to tolerate Helga until they become her individual target. The social fallout and personal cost that came along with this for Helga was truly just enormous as well. The moment that she stepped onto that stage and got that first laugh, she was in a position of social power. However, it was one that was built on thin ice given the context of her performance and the style of comedy. Sure, she really just spoke the truth, but she did it in a way that people usually avoid. She may have had everybody laughing, but those same exact people, one by one, would become personally offended. It really just culminates in her social ascension here as the funny one, causing immediate destruction of her relationships. Sure, she may have gained social status on stage, but offstage, she lost quite a bit of standing among her peers. It's really sad that Helga's win here, which, let's be honest, they don't come to her very often, came at the cost of trust. She spoke her mind and faced massive backlash as a result. She disrupted the social harmony of the school and essentially was exiled for it. It proves to be a cautionary tale that even if you're right, speaking too honestly might just burn your entire world down. As the whole tale unfolded though, the shift that Helga went through is one that is genuinely remarkable. The moment she stepped on that stage, she controlled the room. People laughed when she said to laugh. The shift from a girl who feels unheard at home to experiencing this alone is one that could make a world of difference for her. It's intoxicating. It's the first time that she's felt heard and like all eyes were on her in a positive way. The louder they laughed, the more power she felt. However, when the script went in a direction that they didn't like on a personal level, her power completely collapses and those laughs change to a deep disdain. Helga realizes that the audience that once cheered her now has turned on her. Her peers gain the moral high ground, turning her into a villain as they all give her a taste of her own medicine, refusing to acknowledge that they all loved it like 5 minutes ago. Helga's power is completely stripped from her, and it's given to the crowd who decides what is and isn't acceptable. The same exact people who built her up at the start of her set tore her down immediately when she wasn't performing exactly as they wanted. The problem is, though, they all want to listen to someone being roasted, but none of them actually want to be roasted themselves. This really is just so reflective of the volatility of public favor and just how quickly it can sway. The saddest part of all, though, is the fact that Helga wasn't even punished for being dishonest. She was punished for being too real. It didn't matter how true the jokes that Helga was telling were or how spot on the impressions were. The fact that their mannerisms were being called into question to begin with was enough for every single one of them to turn on her. The truth is, it really just shows that the power she had never really was hers to begin with. It actually belonged to the crowd all along. I do have to point out, though, that by the end, Helga realized just how alienating that her bit really was. When it came time that Rhonda was essentially doing to her what she did to everyone else, it became clear that the effects of what she had said were totally valid, as she herself had also felt them. The really hard part, though, is that she doesn't ever really take the time to apologize. Sure, the poem full of nice things about her friends was meant to be symbolic of an apology, but the fact that she didn't ever fully say that she was sorry is really indicative of her refusal to be vulnerable. What's truly interesting about Helga as a character is how split her emotional intelligence truly is. Sure, she recognizes and understands her own emotions, but when it comes to the emotions of others and specifically empathizing with them, Helga struggles exponentially. Like, she was completely puzzled as to why everyone was upset with her and didn't want to associate with her. She was completely unable to read the room emotionally. During her routine, she saw the laughter and just kind of assumed that it symbolized automatic approval, not considering that for some, that laughter could have been a mask for their embarrassment or hurt feelings. I mean, she didn't even stop to anticipate that roasting all of her closest friends might come with a bit of consequences. She doesn't consider the emotional aftermath until she's already alienated everybody and burnt so many bridges. When we considered how that ties into her home life and the struggles that she faces on a daily basis in that regard, it shows a major sense of emotional impulsiveness. When it came to approaching this scenario, she was so hyped by the thrill of attention and approval from everybody, as well as the prospect of being super popular, that she was completely blinded by how complex it can be for people to digest unfiltered honesty and the potential consequences of going up there and doing that. When it comes to Helga as a character, though, it's not necessarily just a lacking portion of her emotional intelligence or an act of emotional impulsiveness. Like we touched on a bit ago, it's also a defense in a way. That abrasive persona is like a suit of armor for her. Emotional intelligence is something that requires a degree of vulnerability, and that's just not really something that Helga really allows herself to put on display. Instead, she's a lot more likely to mask her feelings with sarcasm and treat empathy as weakness, when ironically enough, a little bit of empathy was what was needed to remedy this situation. When it really comes down to it, For Helga, and really every character in this episode, there was a quiet process of ego management going on. Helga's roasting highlighted the flaws in all of their carefully maintained public images, and as a result, they all retaliate. Not because she's wrong, but because she's right, and they don't like that. For them, it's not just that she was mean, it's that their egos were bruised. Every joke told was akin to her holding a mirror to them, and not a single person liked what they saw portrayed in that mirror. When it came down to it, their reactions were just pure defensive hostility. Meanwhile, for Helga, she just gets to feel powerful while performing. Yet, when that's all taken away from her, her ego crashes as well. When she tries to replace that roasting with nice uplifting words, thinking that'll gain everyone's approval, it crashes and burns instantly. And at the end of the day, it just kind of shows how insecure and reactive that Helga is to other people's perceptions of her. When they rejected her the second time, her fragile ego took yet another hit, leading to her storming off stage in confusion and anger. And as the dominoes fall, this episode just really is a gigantic ego collision in a sense. Helga's comedy bruised the egos of others, and in turn, their rejection bruised hers. Nobody really gets to walk away feeling better. Just more guarded and likely more confused about how to safely be seen. When we think about it from that angle, the whiplash here is just catastrophic. Helga went into this one trying to figure out which version of herself that people want, and with every single attempt, she lost a bit of clarity. She ends up shedding herself of every single part of her original act, suppressing her authenticity in favor of a safe performance. The devastating truth, however, is that with every single shift she makes to protect her ego, she drifts further from her true self. Only for them to just accept her true self in the end, and recognize that all of this was in the name of comedy. What it really comes down to, though, is that emotional intelligence isn't just about knowing what to say. It's about being aware of how you say it, when you say it, and knowing what emotional trade-offs that you're okay with accepting as a result. Meanwhile, ego maintenance in this sense is kind of like an unseen force swaying everyone's actions and reactions, from the audience's rejection of Helga all the way to her own self-censorship trying to win their admiration back. On a broad societal level, this one genuinely is kind of a meta-commentary on the world of comedy itself. This episode, disguised as a tale about a girl telling jokes, is actually a deep portrayal of the razor-thin line that comedians walk between entertainment and offense, as well as how audiences respond. In general, comedy tends to thrive when it functions as a social mirror, pointing out the truths that one might be apprehensive to say out loud. The moment that mirror becomes a little too honest, though, the audience can turn on you, leaving you hated. This one absolutely shows the tough battle that comedians fight in the sense that people want comedy to be true, but not too true. They want the punchline, but without the punch in a sense. Furthermore, the identity crisis that we saw Helga face in this one is identical to one that every single comedian faces at some point. One sparked by the striking realization that audiences demand authenticity, but only if it's palatable. The internal dilemma of, do I say something real or do I stay likable? When she's edgy and truthful, she gets all the laughs, but she loses friends. However, when she's kind and appropriate, people just completely tune out. This is an excellent portrayal of how comedians walk the tightrope of being original, but not controversial. Being funny, but not making everybody in the room uncomfortable. It's a true-to-life display of how so many comedians struggle to stay relevant without alienating people along the way. On top of that, this episode is also a show of how the role of laughter can be a versatile one in the way that it seems to change and morph throughout this one, depending on the context. In the beginning, laughter equals approval. Helga has everybody in stitches, which to her means they are all eating from the palm of her hand. Eventually, though, that laughter turns into a weapon, being used against Helga. Rhonda mocks her, and everyone ends up laughing at her. Even her best friend, Phoebe. Meanwhile, when she bombs her nice poem routine, the laughter is just completely gone. And of course, that absence says a lot. This episode, from start to finish, challenges the concept that laughter by default means something is working. Laughter, in and of itself, can be performative, manipulative, cruel, or even just empty. At its core, this one truly breaks down the fact that comedy isn't simply about jokes. It's very nuanced, especially when we consider who's laughing, why they're laughing, and at whose expense. On another note though, this one also puts a very interesting spin on the traditional comic archetype. Like, in a lot of typical storytelling, the comedic relief is the one who can tell the truth without punishment. The jester can usually joke without consequence. This one, though, completely flips that upside down, and that's truly interesting in a cartoon context. Helga, the jester in this, is punished for her cleverly honest comedy. Her honesty here really did cost her everything. It really does flip the script on the romanticized idea of being a truth-telling comic. In real life, the price of truth-telling comedy oftentimes is backlash, self-doubt, and social isolation. Helga really was a perfect example of just how this can play out for a comedian who pushes the limit of what's acceptable until they get exiled for it. Of course, this leads to a huge aspect which is layered throughout the entirety of this episode, and that would be the fact that Helga never really stops to ask herself, who is this comedy even for? Is it for the audience? Is this for herself? Is it for approval and validation and laughter? She never really stops to think about who wants this and what it is that they want, and as a result, her downfall comes in the form of performing for people who don't want the honesty that she was offering. Her misunderstanding of what the crowd wanted essentially leads to her act and her reputation completely imploding. With that in mind, this right here is incredibly reflective of comedy in the digital era. Not every audience wants the same thing, and if you misread the room, even for just a brief second, you're absolutely cooked. In its entirety, this episode's meta commentary really serves as a critique of the stage itself. It shows us how audiences can weaponize approval, how comedy can cost you your community, and it highlights how authenticity and likability are always at constant war with one another. It's a pretty intense look at what it means to be funny in a world that can have a tendency to punish honesty, and what it can cost you to speak your truth when the mic is finally in front of your mouth. One other massive aspect of this episode is how Helga's stage experience highlights how tough social rejection sensitivity can be. Helga putting herself on that stage to begin with does take a certain level of high-stakes vulnerability. By stepping up there, she's risking being booed off and not getting any laughs. However, when she starts roasting everybody and getting roaring laughter from the crowd, she starts feeling like she has their approval, which is a hit of validation that Helga rarely gets. For someone who struggles with social rejection sensitivity, that right there can be addictive. We see this in the positive light in Helga's eyes when she talks to Phoebe about how popular she's going to be from everybody loving her act. The moment the crowd turns their backs on her, though, she spirals and pretty much shifts who she is entirely in an attempt to win everyone back. That right there shows that she genuinely is sensitive to what others think about her. And of course, this isn't the only episode that showed us that. That heightened level of sensitivity is a classic sign of social rejection sensitivity. Her immediate and desperate attempts to win everyone back are even more so an indicator of that as well. And that extreme shift from confidence to shame showcases what psychologists call rejection reactivity. Furthermore, this episode is a clear-cut representation of identity performance, not to be confused with performance identity, which we discussed earlier. Whereas performance identity more pertains to feeling pressured to put on that funny clown makeup to be the entertainment, or else nobody'll like you, identity performance more focuses on shifting who you are as a person in order to gain approval and make people like you. A lot of times, that performance identity is intentional. You put on that mask and it can be exhausting. However, identity performance can be both unconscious and semi-conscious in the sense that it's really just adapting your behaviors to make people perceive you a certain way based on who's watching or what's expected. This right here is oftentimes really common in adolescence as people try on different personas to see what clicks, oftentimes basing it on the reactions of others around them. In this episode, Helga's performance is both literal and figurative. Helga has always worn this tough girl mask painted with confidence, sarcasm, and aggression, and it's always been her emotional armor. On that stage, though, that mask becomes her act in a sense. She puts on display an over-exaggerated version of herself, portraying the tendencies of her classmates, but when that stops working, though, she shifts, adapting her performance to an opposite identity as a result of everybody rejecting her harsh honesty. However, it isn't her, and everybody can feel that plain as day. Along the lines, she realizes that she can't be both, and neither are fully accepted. This right here is central to identity formation at a young age. She finds herself asking, who am I allowed to be and which version of me is lovable? But the thing is, she learns in this one that the answer to that isn't ever going to be straightforward. The audience accepts her when she's funny, but only conditionally. The hardest part, though, is the part in the middle, where social rejection sensitivity and identity performance clash, the core of which is just pure emotional chaos. Helga ends up trying on multiple different identities because she's terrified of rejection. Every single laugh and every single boo is a reflection of her worth in her eyes, as her high rejection sensitivity makes this entire scenario feel existential. The hard-hitting and painful truth of it all is that for just a brief moment, Helga's comedy gave her a sense of belonging. That laughter kind of fueled her in a way. But the moment the laughter stopped and everybody pushed her away, her identity started to unravel, showing us that she genuinely doesn't feel accepted for who she truly is. At the end of it all, we can say that this episode isn't just one about stand-up comedy. It's ultimately about emotional survival. It's an episode that shows us what happens when a kid with a bruised sense of self gets just a hint of validation, only to have it ripped away the second that they step off of that stage. What it really comes down to is the fact that Helga wasn't just telling jokes. She was testing the waters of identity and trying to pin down a version of herself that she could get everybody to love and appreciate. Sadly though, what she found instead was that even something as pure as honesty needs to be curated, and even your own truth needs to be marketable. But I gotta ask, what do you guys think? Did this episode completely change the way that you guys think about Helga? Do you recall this one having so many layers to it? Let me know in the comments down below. I always love seeing your guys' feedback. Of course, I have to give a massive shout out to my friends in the True 90s Kids tier on both Patreon and YouTube memberships. You guys rock so much, and I can't thank you enough for all the support that you guys show me. I genuinely appreciate you more than words could ever say. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like and stick around for another awesome nostalgic walk down memory lane. As always, thank every last one of you for watching, and I can't wait to see you all in the next one. Peace.